is Abraham Reyes Porto. Mr. Porto is the Director of Housing of the Urban League of Philadelphia. He has 12 years of experience in the affordable housing arena. He has brought together collaborations with Fannie Mae Mortgage Help Center and the Arizona Mortgage Relief Fund. In 2016, he joined the Affordable Housing Center of Pennsylvania, which is a HUD-approved housing counseling agency. In 2019, he served as the Director of Housing at the Urban League of Philadelphia and is a civil rights organizer. Please welcome to the stage Abraham Reyes Pardo. I'm going to move this forward to you to get to your...
Oh, yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Hi. Very excited to be here this morning. How's everyone doing? Good. Still need some coffee? I got some sugar. Sugar is my poison. So I'm Abraham Reyes Pardo. I'm the Director of Housing at the Urban League of Philadelphia. As it was very well pointed out, I have 12 years of experience in the affordable housing arena. The latest chapter has been one of the most satisfying for me because I have the pleasure of collaborating not only with a HUD-approved housing counseling agency, but a civil rights organization, right? So today, in what we're doing, for those of you who are familiar with the HUD-approved housing counseling programs and financial literacy programs, you know that throughout the country there are a number of organizations that receive funding from the Department of Housing to advance the fair housing arena, the fair housing agenda, and then provide direct services for prospective buyers, for people who are struggling with to keep up with the mortgage. Most recently, we do eviction diversion services as well. And in recent years, we at the Urban League of Philadelphia, we've come to the realization that we can not only be talking about financial literacy and housing counseling, we want to be able to amplify, enhance the experience for the clients who are using our program. So that is how Philly 5000 came to be, and that the font looks a little bit weird. It should say Philly 5000 there, welcoming thousands of Black and brown families to homeownership, right? So back in 2021, a collaborative of organizations in Philadelphia came together, and then we received funding from the Wells Fargo Foundation to advance the needs of Black and brown families seeking to achieve homeownership. It is not a secret that Black and brown households are way behind in terms of homeownership opportunities, in terms of homeownership numbers. So what this initiative does is we're being intentional in trying to close that gap. And I'll tell you a little bit more of what's happening. I'm sure you guys have seen a lot of the press releases and other stuff that has been happening over the past 6 months. But this effort for us on our end started back in 2021, and then it consolidated in 2022 when we actually got approved for the grant. And since then, we have been implementing that grant. Just to give you, I'm sure you guys are familiar with this memo that came out from the Office of Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity. And I always like to read one of the lines that is there, which is, because of systemic discrimination in the nation's housing and credit markets, including by the federal government itself, homeownership rates are much lower for African Americans and other people of color than for their white counterparts. This was true in the 1960s before the Fair Housing Act became law, and it is even true today. The black-white homeownership gap is wider today than it was in 1968 when the Fair Housing Act became law. So it's not only that we are not moving at the pace that we should be moving, it's actually that we're going backwards, right? So we recognize that there is a need to be more intentional. At the bottom there, I'm giving you some context, and some of you might be already hearing different actors using the term SPCPs or Special Purpose Credit Programs, right? This is Worth is not a Special Purpose Credit Program, but is in the spirit of follow some of the same, has the same intention of a Special Purpose Credit Program. And you'll start to hear more about SPCPs. I'm going to use SPCPs because it's a long name. SPCPs, you'll be hearing more and more about that. I cannot meet with a lender these days without them mentioning that they're coming out with their own SPCP. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have their own SPCPs, and what SPCPs do is there is more intentionality about groups that have been marginalized, kept outside of the housing market, kept outside of a red line, not giving enough opportunity, right? So we have the investors, we have the lenders, different mortgage actors, and then organizations like us doing our part. The Wells Fargo calls this project on nationwide. The project is called Worth, Wealth Opportunities Realized Through Homeownership. We are one of 8 markets. Philadelphia is one of 8 markets that was selected for this initiative. And then this is a $7.5 million grant locally that has the intention to create 5,000 Black and brown homeowners by 2026. I said earlier that I wanted to provide more context about other stuff that is happening now, because after this, maybe it was just the timing, but shortly after we made the announcement about this grant, then there were other initiatives that got deployed in the Philadelphia market, including the Convergence NBA, that is the Mortgage Bankers Association doing the same, trying to create more Black and brown homeownership. Then Freddie Mac deployed the SPCP. You might have seen the headliner in the Inquirer. Freddie Mac advances the needs of Black and Latino homeowners to be in Philadelphia, and then we know that Philadelphia is a target market for Fannie Mae. Aside from this commitment made by Wells Fargo through Worth, they also have their own SPCP that has the intention of advancing the needs of Black and brown families, right? So what we're going to be doing in Philadelphia, the goal again is to create 5,000 new Black and brown homeowners by 2026. I'm sorry, this is not. Am I doing it correctly? No, it's not. Oh, there you go. Hold on. I think we got it. Yes. So the goal is to create 5,000 Black and brown homeowners by 2026. I'm sorry, 7.5 million. We can go up to 150% of the AMI. So this is not an LMI only or exclusive product. There are different activities that we will be conducting, including a bilingual marketing campaign. We are providing support for housing counseling organizations to enhance their existing programs. We can provide, we have a minority program that we will be running with the State Finance Agency. Then we will be developing some affordable units as well. And the piece that I'm personally more excited about is 3 million of this money are going directly to applicants and participants of our program. And we are giving out grants of $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 for folks who are trying to attain sustainable homeownership, and that is being layered with other programs such as the assistance provided by the state and the assistance provided by the city. So this is a little bit of what we have done in a year. We reached out around already 25,000 families, 2,600 families attended home buying literacy. Then 720 families already, Black and brown families, bought a home. As of 1 month and a half ago, we had processed 352 grants. And then, as I mentioned earlier, after Worth was announced, there were a number of other initiatives that got deployed in this market as well. Now, I gave you a preview of what the marketing campaign looks like, and for that we have partnered with the Urban Affairs Coalition, HASE, Congreso, and New Kensington City. If you're familiar with the Philadelphia area market, then those are very organizations that have a very visible presence in this market, and they provide not only housing counseling but a number of other services as well. And this is it. This marketing campaign should be ready to go within the next 2 or 3 months. We are, again, we're proceeding with intention, trying to make sure that families know that they are resources for them. And this is a testimonial from one of our clients. And I read this for those of you who were at our dinner. I read this during our dinner. This is something that really touched me. I'm truly and sincerely grateful to everyone for your excellent work in bringing my dream of home ownership to completion. It seemed impossible at that time, but I guess it depends on us how to put the word. I made it. I'm possible. Thank you for your help. There is not enough words to thank you and your team to accomplish self-worth, dignity, respect, moral support, and wealth within a community of highly respected individuals. All right. Thank you.
Yep, thank you so much. All right. For our next speaker today, we have Rachel Wentworth. Rachel joined the Housing Equity Center staff in 2000. Rachel became the executive director of the center, and she served as previously served as both the assistant director and the test coordinator. She has 22 years of experience in fair housing, including intake, complaint handling, investigating. She also trains in fair housing, and she has been a test coordinator for the Greater New Orleans Center for Fair Housing. Please welcome to the stage today for us, Rachel Wentworth. And Rachel, we're going to trade off because this is a high step.
Do you have my presentation?
It is, if you'll just leave.
Okay. All right. Oh. Forward. Okay, here we go. So, thanks everyone. Again, my name's Rachel Wentworth. I'm the executive director of the Housing Equality Center of Pennsylvania. What we do is that we have a two-part program. Number one, we assist consumers with housing discrimination issues. So people who have experienced housing discrimination, people who need assistance negotiating reasonable accommodations and modifications, and people who just have questions about their fair housing rights. The second part of our program is we provide education both to consumers on their rights, but also a variety of other audiences. Housing providers, social service agency staff, local governments, on the rights of their clients and constituents, and also on their compliance responsibilities under the Fair Housing Act. So I've been asked to talk a little bit about the issue of disparate impact under the Fair Housing Act and share a couple of our recent cases that are based on disparate impact. So here's my contact information if you'd like to get in touch. So under the Fair Housing Act, as many of you know, the Fair Housing Act is the federal law that protects individuals from discrimination in all housing-related transactions based on their race, color, national origin, religion, gender, disability, and familial status. Now, the way that we usually think of housing discrimination occurring is that one person is treated differently than another person based on one of those protected classes. But there's a somewhat less known second theory of discrimination under the Fair Housing Act, and this is known as either disparate impact or I'm missing it here. It'll come back to me. But basically, this is discrimination that occurs as a result of a facially neutral policy. This is a neutral policy that is applied equally across the board, but has a disproportionate impact on one of the protected classes more than another protected class or more than the general population. So disparate impact becomes a violation of the Fair Housing Act when a policy has disproportionate harm on one or more of the protected classes, is not justified by a non-discriminatory business reason, and the non-discriminatory business reason cannot be served by a less discriminatory policy. So from a practical standpoint, these cases are often a bit difficult. They require statistical analysis, often to prove the disproportionate impact, but they can be very successfully brought as enforcement actions. And I'm going to just share a couple of recent examples of cases that we've filed, and then a handful of just other examples as well. And this is really, I like to get people thinking about when you're assisting your clients and constituents, or when you're thinking of your policies as a provider, you don't want to think just about treating everybody equally, but you want to think about your policies and the unintended effects that they may have on the protected classes. So number one is Aspen Grove. And Aspen Grove is an apartment complex in Bucks County. We were approached by a couple, immigrant couple. The husband was from Mexico, the wife was from Colombia. The husband was a Mexican immigrant, U.S. citizen. The wife was a legal immigrant from Colombia in process of applying for her citizenship, but did not yet have a social security number. So they were denied an apartment at Aspen Grove due to their policy that prevented anyone from applying if they didn't have a social security number, despite the fact that the husband had adequate income, great credit, was qualified on his own to rent the apartment. So we conducted an investigation. We found that not only did their apartment complex in Bucks County have these policies, but other apartment complexes throughout the country in New Jersey and Florida had similar policies. Not only did they have this policy that essentially, although it was applied equally to anyone who applied, the impact of this policy is on new immigrants who have not yet had received a social security number. So we found that they had two additional policies with a disparate impact. One is that they did not permit anyone with any type of criminal record, whether that be an arrest or a conviction, whether that be a misdemeanor or felony, no matter how long ago that has occurred. So according to HUD, in a piece of guidance from 2017, because we have a criminal justice system that is racially discriminatory, to just bring that over to a housing context and to say we're going to deny anyone with a criminal record just brings that racial bias over to a housing context. They had an additional policy with a disparate impact. They had very restrictive occupancy limits. So The number of people that they allowed in each unit was much, much, much less than the municipality's property maintenance codes. And that policy, again, if applied equally to everyone, will have a disparate impact on families with children who typically have a larger number of people in a household. So we filed a complaint in 2020. This whole complaint took a long time to arrive at a settlement, but ultimately the property management company paid $450,000 in this settlement. A portion of that was legal fees and investigation costs, but the majority of this settlement went to the couple who was discriminated against. This couple suffered real harm in not being able to rent at this apartment. It would have met their needs in a lot of ways. And due to this discrimination, they had to accept a less ideal unit. The wife suffered a back injury from carrying a baby and a toddler and stroller up to the second floor. She was very isolated because she didn't drive. She wasn't near the amenities that they needed. So this was a really life-changing settlement for them. The property management company also had to adopt a number of new non-discriminatory policies. I'm going to move on in my last couple of minutes here. The second example is ProManaged. ProManaged is a Philadelphia property owner and management company, and they had a policy of, for the most part, refusing to rent to housing choice voucher holders. Now, in Philadelphia, 84% of voucher holders are Black, compared to 44% of renters in the city as a whole, and 9% of voucher holders are white, compared to 39% of renters in the city as a whole. So this property management company, you can see this map, the majority of their properties are located in the Northeast in either white or integrated neighborhoods. In all of those properties that we investigated, they refused to rent to voucher holders. The exception to this was a small handful of properties in a predominantly Black neighborhood. So just some more, again, these are kind of statistics heavy cases, but this was in December of 2022, we filed a federal lawsuit. We partnered with the Public Interest Law Center here in Philadelphia, who represented us. We filed a fair housing complaint in federal court, as well as a complaint with Philadelphia's Human Relations Commission for violating their prohibition on discrimination based on source of income. Again, they paid a sizable settlement in this. I'm going to be totally frank and say that this was, the intent of this lawsuit was really to make an example of somebody. So this is a law, the Philadelphia source of income protection is widely violated by landlords. And we really wanted to put together a strong case to bring to light that this is a problem. So basically, the $100,000 that they paid covered the legal fees, covered investigation costs, and covered the statisticians that we hired to do some of this analysis. Again, they had to adopt affirmative marketing policies and other policies to bring them into compliance with the Fair Housing Act. Just a couple of, do I have any minutes left? 2, okay. Just a couple of other examples of past complaints based on disparate impact that we've assisted with. There was an apartment complex that had a policy that all adult individuals who were on the lease needed to qualify independently in order to live at the complex. This prevented and had a disparate impact on families with a stay-at-home parent who is typically a woman, and typically a woman with children, from residing at the complex. So they were denied the ability to rent because of that. Another occupancy policy similar to the one that I described in Aspen Grove. We had a local municipality. This was not our case, but a case maybe 10 or 15 years back where a municipality's crime-free ordinance resulted in the eviction of a victim of domestic violence when her abuser, violently assaulted her. The neighbors called the police, and because the municipality barred any criminal activity on the premises, she was evicted due to that. We had a management company that required all income to come from employment, which denied a single mom who part of her income came from child support. Again, all policies being equally applied, no matter who applies to rent there, but having a disproportionate impact on members of the protected classes. We had a case, and this is another 15 years back case, where a insurance company was refusing to write policies on houses that had flat roofs. Additionally, houses that were over a certain number of years old and houses that were under a certain market value. If you look at our neighborhoods here in the Philadelphia region and you look at what houses are older with flat roofs under a certain market value, you can see that this would exclude a number of predominantly African American neighborhoods. And finally, we had a company who had another very strict criminal record policy. Not only do we have a justice system that discriminates based on race, we have a justice system that discriminates against people with disabilities. So we had a complainant who had a past arrest record for disruptive behavior due to her disability. She was denied housing due to this incident that happened a very long time ago, despite the fact that she now was receiving effective treatment and had not, had these behavioral issues in years and years and years. So I'm out of time. I just wanted to put up, in case anyone's interested in any more information about these cases, but just leaving you with that, when you think of housing discrimination, don't just think of one person being treated differently than someone else in an overt manner, but think about these policies which serve, often unintentionally, to exclude people based on one of the protected classes. Thank you.
Okay. Our next speaker today is Martin Cunningham. It is by no mistake that Martin was born in 1968 and he is named Martin. He has been in the fight for civil rights from the day he was born. Martin is our intern chief counsel, and he is passionate about the fight for civil rights in America and in the state of Pennsylvania. We'd like to welcome to the stage Martin Cunningham.
Good morning, everyone. I guess things shifted a little bit, but that's life. Things shift, and in housing, that's often a theme that runs rampant in the shifting sands of somebody's ability to obtain and retain a housing unit, it's something that oftentimes requires you to always be on your feet and ready to move. So, again, my name is Martin Cunningham. Right now, I've been with the commission for about 18 years. This is an important place, and we do important work, and I'm very, very, very humbled to be a small part of it. Now, I'd like you to please allow me to share some, I think, important information on. Do we have PowerPoint that goes with mine? Oh, is it? So we're going to go backwards in time, which is one of my themes today. So, okay, there we go. There, that's me. So, I have three main points in my theme that I thought we'd talk about today. One, keep a level playing field. Whenever you deal with an antagonistic kind of landlord-tenant relationship and you have potential discrimination, you need to start first with keeping a level playing field. One side is going to be doing one thing, which is to try to remove the person who just wants to stay there. The other wants to just stay there, and they want to go and challenge what they believe is unlawful discrimination, and they're going to go and file sometimes, properly so, with the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission. That's my commission. So one of the themes is going to be that. The other is going to be mind your time. Mind your time. Time is, and I'm going to have a nice little quote in one moment here, which I think is, it's probably one of the, not stoic in that I don't think it's that kind of depth, but you'll find out that it's probably one of the more memorable quotes that you can get in movies coming up. And lastly, be proactive on a complainant side. You need to always be ready to go and defend where you're going to be, because the sands are going to be shifting very quickly, and that's why you want to take initiative to make sure that you take the steps that are required for you to be able to go forth and have a strong defense to why you should still remain in the apartment or housing unit that you're in. So, I think first of all, evictions right now are occurring at such a rapid pace with the cessation of the global pandemic protections that were in there, that I think everybody's heads are spinning a little bit, and we're seeing the ramifications of this type of attack that's going on right now. I know a lot of housing providers were waiting, saying, I have a moratorium, I can't do these things. But we now are seeing a point where we have actually 50% in many cities, more evictions that took place even pre-pandemic periods. So it's a substantial number of people that are being impacted right now. So I'm going to go and date myself and give you all an old movie quote. And that's all right, because I think it has a lot of relevance and impact to what we're talking about today. It comes from that classic John Hughes coming-of-age theory movie called Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Give me a raise of hands if anybody has heard of that movie. Thank goodness. So I was, either you're all movie buffs or I feel like we're all in the same kind of demographic age bracket, which is nice too. It makes me feel better from what I felt like when I got up this morning. So in any event, in that movie, a character named Ferris Bueller came out with this really, I think, poignant note of a quote. And I'll try to use his voice as best I can. Life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it. What's he talking about there? I think it's kind of obvious to me. It's time. It's time. It's inexorably moving. And I think as the character is pointing out, unless we stop back and try to go catch ourselves in it, we'll be washed away. In many housing discrimination cases, there are two competing interests that are occurring at the same time. One, an eviction process commenced by a landlord, sometimes respondent landlord. Second, the discrimination complaint filed by the tenant complainant with our agency. Two coinciding events taking place as the time ticks away. Both are going toward a finish line, which is the same item, which is a housing unit, but one wants to take over a housing unit from somebody there, while the other merely wishes to stay and remain. It's a big deal. It happens very fast, and it's something that we have to, in our profession, we have to realize what's going on. And so we get to the really, really, truly what we're dealing with today. It's a question of time. And yep, that goes like what old Ferris Bueller said. It's the one thing that science has not yet been able to come up with a way to make more of it. And so today is going to deal with scarcity of time and discrimination in housing. And the minutes are slipping away. Tick, tock, inexorably. So I think all these words, they have such an import right now. Like I said before, we have a change, a paradigm shift where we're having a number of additional evictions that are taking place every day. And mind you, with the extra costs that we're seeing with housing units, with rents, there's a built-in incentive that many home property owners have to remove old former tenants that have maybe a better rental agreement and get some new people in and charge more. Or, that's pretty much what it is. I can get rid of you. I could charge you 30% more if I just bring somebody else new in. And then on top of that off, I'm going to be able to remove somebody who is bothersome anyway, maybe making a request for a reasonable modification, or maybe saying something else related to my particular disability or my particular protected class. So if you don't quickly take steps to forestall this eviction process, any decision made related to the discrimination case is going to become much, much less effective, to the extent that it might become moot. So the big question is, what can be done? What can we do? Now, I just told you there's no way to make more of time. I mean, that's something that's going to be, it's going to happen. I can't make more of it. We can't buy it. We can't do anything. But there is one thing I think we can do related to it. I think sometimes we can slow it. There are steps that can be taken to slow the time out before the eviction can take place. And that, I think, is where the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act can come into play. Can we go to slide 2? Oh, that would be me. What can we do? Well, preventing a change to occur, preventing immediate and irreparable harm. That's a technical term as to how we're going to go and prevent a change to occur between a complainant tenant and a respondent landlord. That once change happens, it cannot be undone. And this is the aim of our commission, is to permit a status quo to remain in place long enough for our investigation to finalize, perhaps to have an adjudication to take place to establish whether liability should be affixed. And at that point, we can maybe have a chance to give remedy to somebody who thinks that they've been discriminated against in housing. The power of the PHRA. I have a couple colleagues that really, really love the PHRA. I'm one of them. I don't sleep with it under my pillow, but there's some that do, I've heard. And I have 5 minutes left too. I guess that was important to know. I appreciate that. So what we have the power to do under our statute is to stop potentially an adverse action to take place to remove a complainant from a housing unit through eviction until we have a chance to investigate and complete our determination of liability. But it's not quite simple, as you'll see, and there's some requirements that have to take place. First of all, we have to go and have a complaint being filed. We can't merely go forth and start this without having that. That's a statutory requirement. And it also has to make sure that in order for us to do it, we have to say that prompt judicial action is necessary to prevent immediate and irreparable harm. That's the preliminary injunction standard, and it is not quite a Hail Mary pass, but it's not easy sometimes. It takes a lot of factual averments that we have to place before the court. It takes overcoming of many obstacles. I'll say that. What is irreparable harm? One of which we have to say that in order for this to occur, we have to establish that if a court doesn't step in right at that moment, because don't forget, we have two different courts that are taking place now. We're going to have the commission that's looking at overall whether liability should be affixed against the particular respondent landlord. Also, at the same time, we're going to have the impact of the eviction proceeding that's looking at right now whether or not that tenant should properly be replaced and removed. So we're going to be dealing with a specific term of art on called irreparable harm, and that is a legal term that establishes an injury so severe in nature that it's impossible to calculate the extent by awarding money. So that makes it a little bit more difficult. That means that we have to step into place to actually understand and establish the human cost that is being affected by this eviction proceeding right now, and why, based upon the fact that we have competing laws that are looking at the question, we need to forestall you to take this final step of eviction, allowing us to look at this other point, which is discrimination. As I said, there are examples like a home about to be sold away. That would be irreparable harm. Protecting someone against litigation, that could be irreparable harm. And maybe physical or emotional harm, that could also sometimes be. And it's based on argument. The preliminary injunction. A court may grant a preliminary injunction only where the moving party establishes the following 5 criteria. Number 1, the relief is necessary to prevent immediate and irreparable harm, which we just went over, and cannot be compensated by damages. Number 2, greater injury will occur from refusing the injunction than from granting it. Number 3, the injunction will restore the parties to the status quo as it existed immediately before the alleged wrongful conduct. The alleged wrong is manifest and the injunction is reasonably suited to abate it. And 5, the plaintiff's right to relief is clear. The most difficult one of those 5 is probably going to be the number 5 one in our situation. That's the establishment of the right being clear for the complainant. And that really relates to probably the disparity that we have when we deal with these cases. Number 1, you're going to have a landlord, it's easy. I'm making an argument that I think this person shouldn't be here because they didn't pay or they damaged something or did whatever. But on our end, we have to establish that more likely than not, there's going to be discrimination is going to be found. And the reason that they're doing all this was pretext for discrimination. And that takes time to investigate and determine some things. We aren't able to go and just come blase and prove that. That's the more predicament, the greater predicament that we have to deal with. Like I said, easy, right? No, not quite easy. How much time do I have? We're out of time? Oh my goodness. So it's not. We have to establish irreparable harm. The right of relief has to be established to be clear, and we have to be able to act quickly enough. And that's the time part. Time is very, very vital on this. So what can we do, strategies and tips? Well, first, there's two different strategies. One's going to be internal with the commission. We need to go involve the attorney as soon as you become aware that there's a case that meets these criteria, and we have to speed up our investigations as best as possible so that we can get those facts that'll be able to be pled and argued before a court to be able to preclude the eviction through a preliminary injunction. But the other is going to be the ability of the complainants that are out there, the tenants, to say, okay, what can I do myself? How can I step forward to be able to say, okay, I'm sorry, I know the commission has these steps and these requirements to do. I have to do something myself to help. And that's going to be pay, because we all know if you stop paying and don't put the money in escrow, it's going to be harder to get a judge that's going to look at the other questions. They're going to look at the easy, low-hanging fruit for them. Not paying something is easy. You need to allow them to look beneath the surface of this, what the real problem of this whole case was, and that was a discrimination that was causing this landlord even to want to evict the person. So so again, like I said, as long as a court case is active and a tenant is paying the court order rent, eviction should not take place. It's not always guaranteed, but there's a very, very strong likelihood on that. So we have the two ways to go. We have the commission's attempt at a preliminary injunction, but also the self-help that our own complainants can do in these situations to protect themselves. And I'm sorry, I'm not going to get into all this, but we've had some successes in this way, and mostly it's the self-help in conjunction with our good attorneys that go forward to try to talk to the magistrates ahead of time to let them know and understand what's going on, to help this go before we get too far in the process of the eviction. We've had great successes with some of them, and for instance, right here, we have Deputy Chief Counsel Williams as well as Counsel Robert Taylor, who had some excellent success in the ability to allow their prosecution of a case against service animals to continue on. They happen to were very successful in using a lot of these proactive steps. Any questions? Okay, thank you very much.
All right, let me get this. Oh, no, you're not. You get it? Okay, because I was trying to find you. Let's see. You were way down. All right, folks. Today we have with us Mr. Adrian Garcia, and I'm sure that everyone in the room is familiar with Adrian and how passionate he is in his cause for affordable fair housing. Adrian comes to us with great experience. Adrian is our Director of Housing at the PHRC, but he brings in a various of experience in fair housing. He has experience in advancing fair housing for nonprofit and leadership and government services. He has tailored his trainings that he goes out with and discussions on fair housing to engage diverse communities and for opportunities in fair housing. Please welcome to the stage our Director of Fair Housing, Adrian Garcia.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Did you not get breakfast this morning? Good morning, everyone. Good morning. So how are you liking it so far? Okay, I'll take that as I love it. I'll put the words in your mouth. Watch. All right, so I'm going to make this quick, and even though this is an extensive presentation, I just wanted to kind of hit upon this because there's a theme that's going on today. And that theme is that we all have a role to play in fair housing. Fair housing doesn't happen without everyone in this room. Whether you're a landlord, you might be working for a social service entity, you might be working for a municipal government, you might be working at a zoning office, you have a hand to play. I'm going to tell you why. Let's first start with the Civil Rights Act. We all know this. Many of the attorneys in the room have quoted this when they're out there trying to defend the rights of someone, right? This is the original Civil Rights Act, right? Civil Rights Act that declared the persons born in the United States be citizens without distinction for race, color, or previous condition of slavery or involuntary servitude. Why is that important? Well, because even though that act's been around, it didn't prevent redlining, didn't prevent blockbusting, stealing, restricted covenants, or exclusionary zoning. We're still going through that today. Let's take a look at the first one that I came up with. 1908, Los Angeles City Council passes its first municipal zoning ordinance in the U.S. It lumps laundries, which were owned by the Asian community, into the industrial category to keep them out of the neighborhoods. But, not to be outdone, Baltimore, 1910. Maryland adopts its first racial zoning code. Blacks aren't allowed to live in white neighborhoods and vice versa. In fact, Mayor Mahmoud actually said, we must incubate and insulate ourselves from the blacks because we don't want them weighing down on our property values. We don't want to catch any communicable diseases, right? This is the thought process. This is a zoning law. In case anybody had a thought that zoning laws are benign. The origins of zoning laws are to exclude, to keep people out. Then we look at 1917, Buchanan versus Worley, Supreme Court rules that zoning ordinance in Louisville, Kentucky prohibiting the sale of property in a white neighborhood to a black buyer and vice versa is unconstitutional. Step in the right direction, right? We just saw the origins in Baltimore, so it makes sense the Supreme Court would make this kind of rule. Or does it? 1924, the Commerce Department publishes the Standard State Zoning Enabling Act, a model law for U.S. states to promote zoning regulations. 55,000 copies are sold, and 19 states pass laws based on it. Hold on to that. 1926, Euclid v. Amber Realty. The U.S. Supreme Court rules that municipal zoning regulations in Euclid, Ohio, are constitutional. It's not unusual for our federal government to talk out of both sides of the tongue. Not at all. Happens all the time. Happens all the time. Now we're looking at 1934. Federal Fair Housing Administration, the FHA, is created to boost the home ownership during the Great Depression. And it ensures home mortgages, but only for houses well inside boundaries of white neighborhoods. This leads to that ever famous term called redlining, right? Let's pause and move up to 1968. Because we got the original in 1866, now we're at 1968. This is after 1964 when the Civil Rights Act is passed, right? How many, just show of hands, and I'm sure I'm going to see every hand go up here, at least 75%. How many of you knew that the Fair Housing Act has two goals? Raise your hand if you knew that. Well, love it. And for those that didn't know that, it does. The first portion of that is prevent discrimination. We do that through enforcement, education, we do outreach, we do a bunch of things, education, partnerships. This one here, reverse housing segregation, is the second goal. It's also known as affirmatively furthering fair housing. Long technical term. It's been part of the law since 1968. But Adrian, if it's been part of the law since 1968, why are we still in the mess we're in? Nobody really paid attention to it. And the way the law is written, it almost seems like it's exclusively left up to HUD. It's HUD's responsibility. They got to prove it. They got to do it. But when you start looking at that funding stream and you see everyone that's getting HUD money, you realize it's not just their responsibility. Or they're putting the money into it so that people take responsibility and hold themselves accountable. But it wasn't until 2015 that we actually defined what it was. It's defined as taking meaningful actions in addition to combating discrimination that overcome patterns of segregation and foster inclusive communities free from barriers that restrict access to opportunity based on protected characteristics. Access, opportunity. Access, opportunity. You're going to hear Chad Fry. He'll be talking about access, opportunity. You heard from Abraham. Access and opportunity. Has it worked? Let's take a look at redlining. First of all, what is redlining? The practice of marking maps by race to characterize the risk of lending money and providing insurance. Oversimplified, I understand. I did that on purpose. The United States established the Homeowners Loan Corporation and the Federal Fair Housing Administration during the New Deal era and made the practice much more systemic. This was from the federal aid aimed at preventing foreclosure during the Great Depression. So we had one crisis, but we had to fix it. And this was our fix. But that fix was targeted. So what ended up happening is you wouldn't lend to any areas that were marked in red or yellow. And I'm gonna cover this. Okay? Red, hazardous. Check out that word, hazardous. I'm not going to put money in here, I'm not going to invest in here, it's hazardous. Why is it hazardous? Well, because Black and Mexican and Asian and Jewish, other groups live. These locations were often also industrial areas with older buildings and infrastructure. Now, we didn't write that in there. That's on the actual Hope maps, the notes that are in there, and they get a little bit more explicit. Okay? Yellow, definitely declining. Neighborhoods bordering Black neighborhoods where European immigrants, working class people lived, these places were viewed as concerning, undesirable in the population. Because they could join the community. Now, what I will tell you is this is a forecast. I'll repeat that. This, in 1934, is forecast. Okay? Blue area, still desirable. Established most or nearly all white U.S. born neighborhood with low chance of having immigrant or person of color in the border. And the green, best, ethnically homogeneous, that is white, U.S. born, upper or middle class neighborhood where professionals, men. Okay? So let's take a look at the image. Remember what I told you, it's forecast. They may be written in 1934, but it's forecast. And I'll give you an example. I pulled up the Philadelphia redlining map from 1934. Take a look at all the red on the left side. That's the original map. On the right side, you're looking at the social index of vulnerability map that was done by Richmond in the study that they did there. And what they're doing is these red areas that were redlined, if you notice, are red today because that's where food deserts exist. That's where dilapidated housing exists. That's where high crime exists. That's also where many of us brown people live. Okay? Forecasting. You see the yellow area here? Remember what they said yellow was? It's declining. Therefore, I'm not going to invest there. And if I don't invest there, what happens to a yellow area? High vulnerability. It's forecast. I'll give you another example here. When we look at there's an area here that I have in purple, green area. It's also over there in green. It's forecast. Because it's the best area. Ergo, we're going to invest there. We're going to have the best school districts there. We're going to have the zoning that we want there. And we did. And so that's what you see there. So anyone that comes up and says to you, well, there's no way that there's any correlation. Absolutely correlation. Take a look at these school districts that get the least funding. Where are they located? Take a look at where you find most of the lead contents in the house. Where are they located? Learning disabilities, where's that located? Because when you're growing up in an area that's dilapidated, that's forgotten, empty buildings, hazardous buildings, environmental factors, learning disabilities are an increase in those neighborhoods. That's a fact. So the impact, general wealth impact, education, health and safety, disinvestment. We talked about this a lot of times. Red-line areas are associated with long-term decline of home ownership, home values, and credit scores. People said to me the other day, I said, redlining and educational funding, and they were saying, like, I had too many heads. They said, well, Adrian, that's assessed by school taxes. Right, based on. Okay? Education effects of redlining include the exclusion of minority communities from key resources, including investment. We all saw that decision for the PA Supreme Court, right? Okay. Health and safety, formerly redlined areas tend to have older housing stock, which were initially left to decay, and through the years created environmental issues affecting water and air quality, and of course the disinvestment. Redline communities suffered from lack of investment in housing, education, community development since the origin owners zone corporation. So moving forward, how do we go through it? First step, we got to acknowledge the AFFH deficiencies, and acknowledging means that we need to understand what our role is, right? And that's one of the missions that we started at the Human Relations Commission through my division, is to go out and seek departments that have anything to do with housing. Department of Human Services, Department of Community Economic Development, Department of Insurance, so on and so forth. And we're trying to extend partnerships. And how do we help you do what you do using our influence and vice versa? How can we partner up? Because when we start,
income tax credit.
so when we come in here and start talking and providing that information, the first thing I say to them is, we look at the funding that comes through and we see how we're responsible on funds, state governments, county governments, city governments, housing providers, nonprofit, for-profit, LIHTC, lending institution, community investment act, federal mortgage providers and lenders, USDA fund recipients, housing counseling agencies, and the list goes on. So acknowledging is first, and then the second time is to be able to. So what did we do? Well, we wanted to do the self-acknowledgement. So we put together the State of Fair Housing white paper for the Commonwealth, and we distributed that to all of our governmental partners and to anybody that listened. There's copies upstairs. If you didn't get one, go ahead and grab one on your way upstairs. But that's where we started. And what we did was we put in some findings, because the bottom line is what, like the blue line says, it's about fairness, it's about equality, it's about time. It's about time. So federal efforts to enforce the AFFH mandate have not made significant progress toward its goals. Pennsylvania needs to take a leading role in ensuring that state, county, and municipal leaders actively work to break down barriers that prevent residents from achieving. I'm not saying you have to change the way you rule in the township, but I am saying that when there is a reasonable accommodation for a group home to be placed in a residential setting, and it's already a resident that's going to be there, that you understand that that is not a variance, that that is a reasonable accommodation. So these little adjustments, and so working with DCED, we're going to be able to get that message out. Because the impact on protected classes is that they have the protections from acts of discrimination, housing policies that have led to systemic inequalities and limited the supply and availability. The recommendation is explore registration, legislation that provides additional accountability to state agencies, local municipal governments. Tough hill to climb. That's a tough hill to climb. But we're slowly but surely making some strides and getting the message out there. I think effective statewide code enforcement is a necessity. Most of the people that I used to call my previous job were people that were within protected classes of age, senior citizens, disability, individuals with disability, single parent, female head of household. So that's familial status. And the list goes on. These are the people that are living in substandard housing. So, as as I said to many state legislators when I used to work at another place, are we really affirmatively furthering for housing if we know this is occurring and we allow it to continue? That's what I call a verbal grenade. It's rhetorical, and I just kind of left it there. The recommendation is to introduce an amendment to the Landlord-Tenant Act of 1951 that would provide effective measures. This is a third rail. I realize that. They don't want to open that act up. But we're going to keep on banging the drum until somebody decides, you know what, this is worth it. Source of income protection, we heard a little bit about that today. I'm not saying that landlords have to automatically enroll in the Section 8 program. What I am saying is that because of the people that utilize these programs, and in Pennsylvania it's the elderly and the individual with disability, that's the top two categories. Because of the individuals that are using this program, when you say no Section 8, you're saying no disabled. You're saying no family with children. You're saying no people of color. Call it any way you want to call it, that's the way I see it. I use the same rationale that HUD used when they did the criminal background language. When they put that guidance out there, they said because of the stoppage, arrest, and conviction rates of people of color, a blanket ban on criminal records would have a disparate impact against that community. I'm saying the same thing about Section 8. I'm saying the same thing about having an artificial criteria that you must have 3 times the amount of rent in order to live. What's that going to do to someone that's getting Social Security? They're never going to live anymore. Right, so the recommendation is to introduce and/or support legislation to add source of income as a protected class. I went a step further. I went to the ED, because I'm like that, and said, we have regulatory authority, we should examine a way that we can put a guidance together that would defend this. Now, again, uphill climb, lots of research to do, but I'm willing to put in the work. That's it for me. Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah. It's what?
It's chat 5.
Yeah, I'm just looking.
Forward.
Still going. You think he's at the end?
Forward.
Okay.
There you go.
Oh, that's right. There? All right. There we go. Okay. Next to the stage is Chad Fry. He is the CEO of the Neighboring Group. As CEO, it is a Pennsylvania-based consulting company that empowers neighbors and neighborhoods by increasing the access to various forms of capital. Chad is given to creating diverse teams that advance neighboring as a verb with public education partners, local municipal governments, leaders, and faith-based community partners. Chad is also the president of the Neighboring Academy, which creates a pathway to home ownership for senior high students in the Stilton High Spire School District. He has over 20 years of education experience. Please welcome to the stage, Chad Fry. Okay.
Okay. Good morning. That was vibrant. So you can imagine I'm going to talk about neighboring. But before I do, I want to just sincerely thank the folks who planned and brought everybody together in this room, because it is really, really good to be in the company of neighbors who care about fair housing, access, And I just want to sincerely thank you, Adrian and Chad. It is wonderful to be right in front of someone who has a great name. Okay, so basically, I want to just ask you, we're all here because we care about access and opportunities for fair housing, yes? I want to push a little bit further, though, and ask and assume we also care about neighboring and belonging to a beloved community. So I want to evoke some of that for us today, because I don't want us to lose sight in all of the work that it takes to create access and opportunities, what the big vision and the dream is, right? So, Martin, thank you for your remarks. You actually changed some of my presentation as I was listening to you. So I think I want to just share with you a story last night, because it might help ground this. I was leaving my hotel, and I was headed out to make a reservation time at a local restaurant, which is fantastic, by the way, in Philadelphia. If you have not sampled the steak here, it's awesome. And on my way, 2 young men stopped me and asked if I cared about gun violence in the city, and I was late. And I said that I did, and they tried to have a conversation with me, but I was hurriedly trying to get across the street. I'm like halfway out in the middle of the street. And I said, walk with me. So we walked for about 5 blocks and talked together. And basically, you know, nothing substantive came out of that in terms of action, except that we had a moment, we shared a common concern, and we shared some resources back and forth. Have you ever been in a situation where you're on your way to something and you've been stopped by somebody on the street? Yeah? There's a moment of paralysis that happens there, right? You're just frozen. What do? I've made a commitment over here, and I need to honor that commitment. At the same time, somebody who's caring about something, needing something, is asking me, right, to stop. So, Martin, in terms of time, I just want to shift that direction a little bit, because I want us to think about time for our neighbors. And I want us to do a little bit of reflection about the culture that we're in, the lifestyles that we have, and our ability or inability to make time for the people that are immediately around us and near us. Does that make sense? This is critical. Have you ever heard of the Good Samaritan study? Yeah? If you have, it came out of Princeton. It's dated a little bit, but it found this. They were studying seminarians. These are folks that want to get into ministry and care about people, right? So these are altruistic, caring people in the group. And they set this study up, 3 different groups, and they said across campus, you got to preach, this is a Christian group, a sermon about the Good Samaritan. The story of the Good Samaritan was folks were passing and someone was hurt. Someone from a disaffected, ostracized, marginalized community was hurt, laying in the road. They were attacked by robbers. And the folks that stopped, it was kind of a study on who stopped. You'd think the teachers of the law would stop. They didn't. It was somebody else who stopped to care. Well, on the way to preach this sermon about caring for others in their time of need, they staged an actor who was actually in need. And they studied who stopped and why. You know what they found in the control? The only thing that they could control for in the study was that the folks who stopped to care for the people were folks that weren't late. Didn't have anything to do with whether or not they cared. They all kind of cared, right? But their time was what stopped them from reaching out in the immediacy of the person who was in front of them in their need, whether or not they were late. So I just want to situate this conversation in, as you take stock of your own life and your own schedule, do you have time to be a neighbor? And I want to talk about being neighbor as a literal thing, okay? So I'm going to do 2 things. 1, I'm going to define the term a little bit because we're going to use it today, and I want to give you some background. 2, I want to give you some practical applications and case studies, okay? So let's go right here. I'm using the term neighboring as a verb. This might be a little weird. You think neighbor as a noun. Neighboring as a verb, it's an action. And I want to talk about it in three different ways: individually, with small groups, and then at a social level. Most of the conversation today is around that social, systems level thinking. How do we, in organizations, neighbor with others? But at the individual level, I want to offer you this. You can't love your neighbor if you don't love yourself. Okay? So number one, as we think about making time, it's critical for all of you in this room to make time to understand how to love yourself. And many of us are strangers to ourselves. There are parts of who we are that we don't understand. Make some time. Get to know those parts of who you are, because those parts of who you are can help you reach out and make a connection with other people. Does that make sense? You got to love yourself here, individual level. Small groups. Margaret Mead says, don't ever underestimate the power of a small group to change the world. Indeed, they're the only ones who ever have. Does that make sense? Neighboring is about making those small groups, and I want to challenge you to do that literally. Do you know the names of the people that live right beside you? Have you mapped it out in front and in back? Do you know their kids' names? This is not a metaphorical abstraction. Don't take it and be like, everybody's my neighbor. If everybody's your neighbor, nobody is. Make sense? Take some time, get to know those folks, host a block party, go over and make cookies. Introduce yourself to the people around and start those small groups to have conversations. What's happening in our neighborhood? What's happening on our block? Does that make sense? Lastly, then you start to get into systems thinking. And here's where I want to challenge you to help the PHRC, because we need more neighbors in this room, right? Get them involved. Get them engaged. Give them tools. Give them access. Help them create opportunities. Now we're starting to talk about neighboring. It's greater than the sum of its parts, okay? Next slide, which is me again. This is just a quick graphic. I want to talk about 3 practical examples of neighboring that's happening in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Familiar with Harrisburg, just down the way? Okay, there are 3 branches to this tree: a neighboring challenge, a neighboring academy, and a neighboring ecosystem. I would love to talk with any of you afterwards. We don't have the time now. But the neighboring challenge is a challenge to municipal leaders. This is kind of a mayoral challenge. The city of Harrisburg is taking this neighboring challenge. It's to take 10 neighboring principles that have been researched. Let's go back. And embed them into policies and practices. Case study: Harrisburg and the Harrisburg Housing Authority were the recipients of a HUD grant for second promise neighborhoods. And they're looking at a housing project, the Hoveter Homes and Hall Manor projects, to redesign them. We are working with them to help embed these neighboring practices. Conversations are in the mix of how do we train resident ambassadors to become neighbors and to create a community in a public housing project that we're trying to reimagine. Make sense? That's the neighboring challenge at a municipal level. The neighboring academy. We're trying to begin to work within public schools in Steelton High Spire. This is one of those areas that Adrian pointed out on the map that has historically been separated out. It's a steel city, and as steel goes, so goes the mill, so goes the town. It's depressed and difficult. We're trying to create a pathway for home ownership with 9 through 12th grade students. How do you prepare in a public school folks to become homeowners and to become neighbors? I believe that education is not just about going to college or getting a career, but it's also being about, how do I become a neighbor? How do I move back into a neighborhood, be a good citizen? What does that responsibility look like, right? And position students to get the mortgages they need, to take advantage of the programs in order to buy the houses in their own communities. Thirdly, the neighboring ecosystem. This has to do with software and communication. I'm currently working with the United Way. As you may know, 211 is an incredibly important resource for folks who are calling, needing assistance. Unfortunately, they do not have the support services to be able to know what happens after that call is over. Referrals come in, but are they going out in end-to-end kind of referrals with service providers? Do folks know what the quality of the assistance and service provided to folks who have called in is? Do we have the metrics to be able to inform policy around housing, utility provision, all the kinds of things that are connected to fair housing? Make sense? So this is a software initiative to take those calls and to do end-to-end referrals and to operate within other systems. So those three things, love to talk to you more about that. With that, I click and want to say thank you, but I'm trying. I'm not quite sure what to do here, but thank you. Okay, cheers. Oh, hey, there we go. I got a point. There's like a little window there.
Either that, I'm gonna have to grow your legs. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Fry. All right. Next to our stage is someone that we all know and we all have heard speak and experience. It is our Executive Director, Chad Dion Lassiter. Chad is the national expert in the field of American race relations. Mr. Lassiter has worked in race, peace, and poverty-related issues in the United States of America, Africa, Canada, Haiti, Israel, and Norway, and is called upon frequently by media outlets to provide community service comments concerning race relations and potential solutions in our organization and in our communities. Chad has received his master's degree at the University of Pennsylvania Graduate School of Social Work, where he was the A. Philip Randolph Award winner in 2001 and was the recipient of the prestigious University of Pennsylvania Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Community Involvement Award in 2008. Executive Lassiter was chosen as the National Association of Social Workers of Pennsylvania Chapter Social Worker of the Year in 2021. He has been recognized in City and States 2022 Pennsylvania 50 over 50, City and States 2022 Pennsylvania Impact of 50, and City and States Pennsylvania Power of Diversity Black 100. Please put your hands together and welcome to the stage Chad Dion Lassiter.
Good morning. Thank you for reading the bio. I think the staff knows after 5 years, I'm just a servant leader. I want to acknowledge Miss Arlene. In our tradition, we call our elders with a level of affection. She's known me for about 30 years. She's a dear friend and colleague of my mom. So what's not mentioned in that bio is Miss Arlene remembers me when I was growing up in the church. We both go to Triumph Baptist Church to this day. And the plate would come around for offering, and I would take the money out of the plate and put it in my pocket. Simply because, nobody ever said you don't take the money out of there. I was a very mischievous kid growing up in Triumph. So I'm just honored to be in this space with her, with Director Garcia, and so many individuals who are on the front lines fighting for fair housing and social justice. I was going to have a PowerPoint, and my PowerPoint was going to move us from a historical moment with the backdrop of a lot of the things that Massey talks about in American Apartheid, bringing it to the contemporary moment, looking at a lot of the things that a lot of you have surmised with regards to fair housing and gross discrimination in the housing space, quote some of the color of law. I was also going to plagiarize some things from my dear friend Angela MacGyver, and a lot of the PowerPoints by Director Garcia. But what I'm going to do is I shifted. I have my flash drive, but I shifted because as I'm sitting in this seat, it is very rare that you can be in a space where two people names are Chad. And for me, there's not a Chad plus, right? It's just Chad. It's not like Chattanooga, Chad Sturt. It's just Chad. But what I want to do today is I want to have each of you stand. I want you to each stand. Everybody here, stand. I want you to stand. And as you stand, I want you to close your eyes. Close your eyes. I'll tell you when to open your eyes. Think of your home, your favorite place in your home. Now imagine your home burning to the ground or your favorite room being burnt out. Stay with me now. Your daughter, your son, your significant other, an elder person in your family, they have died as a result of this fire. Your pet, your wedding pictures, your important documents like Social Security cards, birth certificates, family heirlooms, all burnt. If you are religious, the holy texts that you read are burnt in this fire. Please open your eyes and have a seat. Tracy, what were your reflections? She said sadness, anger, fear. Miss Arlene, what were your reflections? She said trauma. Zulai, what were your reflections? She said angst. Kara Bowman, what was your reflections? She said relaxed and sad. And lastly, Director Chang, what were your reflections? She said she had a visceral reaction when I said son. So I'm going to open with a quote, and then I'm going to get into my presentation, and then what we're going to do is we're going to move on to some Q&A. And the quote is as follows. As I sat and remained still, I thought about my gifts and my blessings and how they must always be used for humanity. I must always be about building truth within myself and others. That is a quote from me when I left the University of Penn, where I had my own center to take a job as the executive director of the Red Cross House. I had a family member who died in a fire. The Red Cross House were those angels in the night that intervened on behalf of my family. And so it's really unprecedented for those of you who are from Philadelphia and you know a little bit about the University of Penn. How does one leave when they have their own center? How does one leave when they're a young scholar with no PhD teaching 3 classes with their own center around mentoring youth who have a parent incarcerated at state or federal prison? My assignment moved me to the Red Cross House, the first and only house of its kind in the country that serves as a disaster recovery center for individuals who are displaced because of fire. By a show of hands, how many people are aware of the Red Cross House here in Philadelphia? Okay. Just a few people. Okay. It's right in the same catchment area as the University of Penn, right off of 39th and Poughton Avenue. So as a disaster recovery center, how do we help people make whole? Or what Chad mentioned, that Good Samaritan, right? I spent some time in seminary too, so excuse me if I get a little preachy. But that Good Samaritan parable that you brought about, at that time, Samaritans and Jews despised one another. But nevertheless, it was the man that needed help. And Yeshua says, who is my neighbor? Right? And the response was not Socratic. My neighbor is the person who I see their moral dilemma and I intervene. So everyone here, whether you call yourself a fair housing advocate, whatever you define yourself as, we all should be in the space of the identity of the Good Samaritan. To help the least of these, or in Greek mythology, to assist the wounded healer, because I come from the tribe of the wounded healer. So the Red Cross House, once again, the first and only house of its kind that serves as a disaster recovery center, 26 hotel-style suite facilities. Those individuals who were impacted by disaster, whether that be a fire, a water main break, all of those disasters, individuals will lose their homes. And they would have to come to what Chad mentioned, that beloved community. Against the backdrop of social vulnerability. An example of social vulnerability in context would be looking at Hurricane Katrina. During Hurricane Katrina, from a historical standpoint, individuals in the contemporary moment would say, you know what, Michael Hardiman, you know what, Ariane Bethea, we rode out Bessie in 1950. So we're going to be okay with Hurricane Katrina. What's missing, or what was missing in the media from a pretext and context perspective, is the mere fact that social vulnerability had individuals saying, where am I going to go? Women, elderly women, children. I don't have a vehicle. And then once again, where am I going to go? I'm already in subpar, substandard housing. Bring it to Philadelphia. Those of us who grew up in Philadelphia, we remember Logan. We remember a section of Philadelphia called Logan, where houses were created on land that underneath the land, it was already sinking, but yet we put black and brown people in houses. And if you go by Logan, for those of us who are from Philadelphia, it doesn't exist anymore. It doesn't exist anymore because of environmental racism. So the social vulnerability in the city of Philadelphia as it relates to the Fair Housing Act is we're always advocating for people to have affordable housing. We're oftentimes, and Director Garcia is really apropos about this, missing those things of justice, holding landlords accountable, holding those individuals who are the renters accountable. And so Philadelphia also is a city of row houses. And so if 6617 has a fire, the chances are 6618 all the way down to 6626 or more are going to have fires. And so you're talking about one fire starts against the backdrop of a whole entire block being engulfed. The social vulnerability is because I am living in a space where it's generational. It's my mother, my grandmother. I'm living in a space where because of inadequacies, because of, we're in a Weissman Jewish Center, so I'm not going to say slumlords, indifferent landlords. We have faulty wiring, right? So we say, well, wait a minute. And those of us who were in Philadelphia remember a fire, a massive fire over in Southwest Philadelphia about 10 years ago where an entire block was engulfed and individuals lost their lives. And the media said, where were the parents? Where were the parents? We never asked that question on the other side of the color line. If you want to know where that mother was, she went next door to wash her clothes because they didn't have any electricity. It was a Senegalese family. And she never knew that coming back in a split second, the faulty wiring that was in that home was going to lead to displacement. Why is this important? Because in fair housing, there has to be discussions around trauma. There has to be discussions around awareness. There has to be discussions around prevention and intervention. And at the Red Cross House, we established the first disaster law clinic for any American Red Cross in the country with the Temple University Beasley School of Law. I had 10 students every semester for 3 years. So for our legal team, you didn't know that I was a legal professor. And within the context of the disaster law clinic at the American Red Cross House, we had students who were emerging to become lawyers, Director Young, working on tangled title, working on landlord-tenant conflict, working on living wills. And some of the families, Ariane, they would say, well, why do I have to have a living will? I don't have anything. For some of us and the traditions we come out of, that Bible tells a story because in that Bible, it lists the lineage of every single person that has been born, when they died, and who was married. Also, when we went to fires scenes, there were individuals who would not leave various places, Albert, because I don't want to leave because I don't want to lose my pet. So what did we do? We established Red Paws. Red Paws was a safe space for your cat, for your dog, for your turtle. This is all part of the disaster recovery model. Spiritual care, mental health care. How do you deal with the trauma of all of the issues that come with disaster? And so we also work with job search. We also did play therapy. We also did art therapy. We also did movie night. And with movie night, we showed movies that were inspiring, like A Killer and the Bee and multiple others. You may say, how is this important? It's important because Director Garcia gave me a task. My task was not to talk to you about qualitative, quantitative data around fair housing. It wasn't to come here and talk to you about redlining, appraisal, bias, discrimination. Albert can tell you that. I did that during my keynote presentation for the Pennsylvania Realtors Association. Tracy had me do another one up in Harrisburg where I was the keynote. My job today was to talk to you about human brokenness. Human brokenness and how when discrimination happens in fair housing, oftentimes we're not on the other side to see the outpouring of people who are despondent, people who feel despised, and people who feel depressed. So it's more than us just advocating to make sure that we affirmatively further fair housing. It's also us being still in the moment and listening to the narratives of the individuals who have been discriminated against in the realms of housing. Zulai told me I got 2 minutes left. I'm going to use all 2. So as I conclude, what I learned when I was the executive director of the American Red Cross House of Southeastern Pennsylvania is that Philadelphia lacks adequate housing, affordable housing. Though we were the only social justice recourse for individuals, a lot of people ended up being homeless after they left the Red Cross House because we only kept you at the Red Cross House for 34 days, working on your disaster recovery plan, making sure we got your children to school, making sure that we helped you with community legal counsel and multiple others. But when they left, they still found shortage in housing. And so today we're here to talk about putting the act back into fair housing, but it's not just because of a conference. It's not just because we're called to do it in the moment. It's because Mother Mary Scaloli said, if none of us are home, then it impacts all of us. All of us here, raise your hand if you've ever been homeless. Not one hand went up. Raise your hand if you know someone that has been homeless. Put your hand up high. Put your hands down. Raise your hand if the person that has been homeless is a family member or friend. Keep your hands up. Look around. So put your hands down. So it's everything that you spoke about, Chad. Let's be better neighbors. It's everything that you ascribe to, Director Garcia. And I differ with you from this perspective. No, you don't sleep with the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act like Commissioner Hardin. But you live every waking moment fighting for the rights of individuals who have been discriminated against in the space of housing. And you have set an unprecedented example for not just this commission, not just this executive director, not just these commissioners, but for the people of the Commonwealth. And so, sir, I live in a space where life is very short. So it's about flowers now
because tomorrow's not promised. Lastly, when people are discriminated against because of housing, we're not certain what happens to them when they leave our Philadelphia regional office, our Pittsburgh regional office, our Harrisburg regional office. We're not there to look at the rates of trauma, the rates of depression. We don't know if they're living in a car. We don't know if they're living in a bus station. And as I end, Miss Arlene knows this. At our church, we have something called Mission Moment, where you have to give mission offering. It typically goes like this. All of us are blessed because we're here today, and we open up our food cover in our refrigerator and we have food in it. That's not true. Some people are going to houses of faith after living in a bus station. So when they leave the PHRC, it's our duty. It's your duty at the Urban League under your former president and CEO, who's my big sister, Andrea Custis. It's all of our duty to be not just neighbors, but good neighbors. To deal with the human brokenness. To deal and mend the wounds of those who have been impacted by fair housing discrimination. We do it at the PHRC with our Pennsylvania Human Relations Act. We do it by letting people know that you don't have to be a victim of housing discrimination. You can file complaints. And today is just the beginning. Our conference is the conference, but we do this 365 days under the leadership of this individual, our regional directors, and everyone that touches a housing case. Thank you. Because I was long-winded, we're going to skip Q&A.
No.
Let's just say it in a more polite, professional way.
No, I did not say that to him. No. Okay. If we could please have Abraham Pardue please join us again. Mr. Pardue, we would like to thank you for joining us today and speaking and bringing your message to us. And on behalf of us, we would like to present you with this plaque.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Can I stand up here tall? Hey, I'm never going to be this tall in life.
So that you know, each plaque will read, the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission recognizes your dedication in fighting for fair housing equality for all, presented to the person. You're with the Urban League of Philadelphia, June 21st, 2023.
Thank you so
Let's get our director of fair
Thank
housing.
you so much. As I'm looking tall for the first time. Thank you
for all
much.
that you do, brother.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
All right. Next, if we could please have come to the stage Martin Cunningham, our illustrious internal chief counsel.
She wants to help her down.
A little later, maybe.
Thank you very much.
Next, Mrs. Rachel Wentworth. Thank you so much, Rachel, for joining us today. Chad Fry, if you could please join us at the front of the room. Thank you so much. That's it. Yeah. All right. You want to tell them? Yeah. No problem. Go right ahead. Thank you. This concludes our session for today. If we could all readjoin back into the Dell Theater for our next session. Okay? Thank you so much.